Welcome to this webinar about how to find church planters. And this is sponsored by the National Association of Evangelicals. And I'm Randall Bach, and I'm ambassador to denominations for the NAE. If your denomination is a member of the NAE, it's great to have you participate in this webinar. And if you're not a part of the NAE, we're also pleased that you've joined us. And for you, here's a brief word about the NAE. You know, in a time of angry, shouting, and divisive voices in our culture, the National Association of Evangelicals is a softer but influential voice and witness to our government, culture, and to our entire nation at large for the transformative power of biblical truth. There are 40 member denominations of the NAE, along with other nonprofits, schools, businesses, and individual churches that are also members of the NAE, and they collectively represent millions of people. And if you'd like to learn more about the NAE, simply go to nae.org. Now, a word about our presenter. When I became a regional denominational leader, I realized we needed the assistance of someone from outside, someone with greater expertise than we possessed regarding church planting. We painfully demonstrated that just throwing money at a church plant yielded very little fruit and was actually very poor stewardship. So I began a search to find who could help us. And that search led me to Gary Rohrmayer, who I believe is one of the nation's foremost church planting strategists and practitioners. He's more than just a theorist. I believe we were one of the first denominations to, so to speak, knock on Gary's door, asking if he would help us, which he so kindly and expertly did. Well, I know that since then, many denominations and networks have also come knocking on his door, to the point that Gary is at the beginning stage of transitioning from his current role as president of Converge Mid-America to focus on leading Accelerate, which was birthed out of a great vision to see church planting accelerate throughout the myriad of denominations, associations, and networks across North America. Now, all registrants for this webinar have received or will be receiving an email with Gary's contact info in it, so that if you desire, you can follow up with him after today. When I first became a regional director, I was looking for someone who could help us from the outside. I knew that we demonstrated we needed help and that just throwing money at church planting was not going to work. We demonstrated that was a very painful outcome. So I went searching for someone to help us, and that search led me to our presenter today, Gary Rohrmayer, who is the president of Converge Mid-America. And Gary did such a great job of helping us, and I know many other denominations have come to him since. And he's in the process, that's all in God's order of these things, he's in the process of transitioning now from Converge to leading Accelerate, which was birthed out of a vision to see church planting accelerate throughout the denominations, associations, and networks across North America. Now, if I'm repeating myself, sorry, but you've all received or will be receiving an email with Gary's contact information so that if you desire, you can follow up with him after today. Also, we will try to have a few moments at the end for questions and answers. And what you can do throughout this webinar is if you will submit those using the Q&A feature, not the chat feature, and then we will share some of those with Gary at the conclusion of this time today. Gary, thanks for joining us today. Sorry for the little hiccup. It wouldn't be Zoom if we didn't have something like that along the way. Thanks for investing in our participants today, and we're all yours, my friend.
All right. Well, I'm so honored to be here and partnering with the NAE, and it's exciting working with you again, Randall, and so it's been quite a journey, and it's very exciting to see what God is doing in the Open Bible. And I was just with them and their team at Exponential a month or so ago, and they had a whole crew there from around the country, and it was very, very exciting to see a lot of young leaders, young church planters, and the energy that they have for church planting, and just a real movement energy happening there. And so it's very, very exciting to see it happen. But yes, I'm just going to walk you through a few slides here. Accelerate, this is our motto. We serve leaders who serve church planters, and that's really our vision and dream. And we do that through a few ways, through executive consults, and also through executive coaching. I'll talk about more of that at the end. But let's get into our topic today. And, I'm sure many of you have read this book, The Blue Ocean Strategy: How to Create Uncontested Market Space in a Competitive and Make Competition Irrelevant. Well, one of the things that's happened in North American church planting, it's suffering from the stagnant effect of decades of unhealthy competition, and almost making ourselves irrelevant to its culture. This generates the question: where do you find church planters? Now, I want to really make this statement, and I think it's a very important statement, because I think it's only in a North American context where we ask that question: where do you find church planters? Because our region, the region that I serve within Converge, has expanded all the way. We serve all the way from. We really started in the Midwest, and we call Mid-America, and now we're because of several mergers that have taken place, we extend all the way down into the South and into the Caribbean, and so our region started off with 3 states, and now we're in 15 states and 27 countries. And one of the great things is we're working in countries like the Dominican Republic, and we have ministry partners down there and Converge churches. There's a movement of churches down there that has been going for years. It was started by a man, retired, and planted his first church at the age of 50. Today he's 90 years old, and they've started over 100 churches, and now they're planting churches in the U.S. And one of the things they never ask is, where do you find church planters? Because they don't ask that question, because they develop church planters out of the harvest. They're never asking that question: where do you find church planters? Because they know where to find them. They find them in the harvest. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have in a North American context, is where we've got to change our mentality, and we've got to find them in the harvest. And so that's going to be part of our talk today. So in this book, The Blue Ocean Strategy, he talks about there's red oceans and there's blue oceans, and the red ocean is always competing with the existing market space, right? Trying to beat the competition, exploiting existing demands, right? All these things. And one of the things that happens is, for the last 50, 60 years, denominations, networks have been competing for a small market of people. This small, there's only about 15% of the pastoral pool have the skills and abilities to plant a church, and so there's a small group of people, and so we've been going after them. And so one of the things that happens is we're competing against each other, and so So we're basically we're raising the we're raising our funding level. We're creating a better marketing system. We're creating better you know all sorts of systems to find church planters and uncover them, and from the outside and bringing them into our tribes, right? Now, I believe that. I believe you can recruit people from the outside in, but I really think it's better to develop them from the inside, up from the inside, right? And raise them up from within your tribe and send them out. And the blue ocean strategy really talks about that, because the uncontested marketplace is the harvest. It's the harvest. If we kind of use his analogy, these authors' strategy, if you look at this market strategy, the blue ocean strategy, it makes competition. If you're winning people in the harvest, you don't have to worry about the competition. You have to worry about the other denominations or networks. You don't, you're creating a new demand, right? You don't have to raise the cost. So I was down in the DR, and I was preaching at one of the churches, actually the second in command of this network, this large network that we're partnering with down there. And I was preaching in the church, and there's a church of about 250 people. And the pastor, just on that day alone, introduced me to 4 church planters that he's been working with and developing that were in his church that Sunday. So they're always raising up church planters from within. And Ralph Moore, if you studied any of Ralph Moore's material, this is Ralph Moore. Ralph Moore has been developing church planters from within, his churches, his Hope Chapels, all over, that have gone from Southern California to Hawaii, throughout the throughout the islands. He's been, and they tracked it probably over close to 3,000 churches have been planted, through his network. And they've done it through a discipleship model, raising people up from within and discipling people through his church, reaching people, discipling them, raising them up from within. And so this is what we're talking about, the blue ocean strategy. And so we talk about the whole idea. One of the issues in North America today is the church planting pipeline is drying up. And you can see the last 40 years that in 2010 to 2000 to 2010, we had a great explosion of growth of new churches and great gains in evangelical church during those years. And you can see the last 10 years, what's happened. We're all feeling it, right? We're all feeling it. And there's many factors to that. We'll see that in the next slide. And because the pipeline is drying up, and so we're feeling the pain of this, and so we've got to rethink our strategies, and a lot of people have gotten comfortable kind of drawing people from the outside in instead of raising people up from the harvest within our churches and sending them out from within our fellowships. And so this is a key thing. The Allison Park Leadership Network came up with these reasons where have all the church planters gone? Church planting is hard, right? Older churches are healthier and more relevant, so out of those 52,000 churches that have been planted in the last, during those 10 years, a lot of those have made it, and a lot of those are strong and healthy, and there's healthy transitions taking place. And so younger leaders are looking for those succession opportunities there. Younger leaders are taking longer to develop. It's financially impossible for younger leaders to start churches, with the cost of higher education, seminaries. There's a financial stranglehold on these young couples. The passion for the lost is growing cold. We've all seen that. The need for spiritual revival in the church. These younger leaders, millennials, Gen Z, don't like the model-centric approach that a lot of denominations and networks have in their church planting methods. And that's one of the reasons we talk, you got to have a third, we call a third way of planting in your movement. You got to be open to the different approaches of planting in your movement. And then the inability for the church to consistently raise up leaders on the local level. Jeff Christopherson said this: in the past, the normative strategy for finding leaders was recruiting them from outside sources, be it at a seminary, parachurch ministry, or a staff member from another local church. This preoccupation of recruiting masks the ecclesiastical malaise that substitutes the addition for the indigenous effort to nurture, developing an internal pipeline designed for multiplication. What's the secret ingredient for leadership development? In this article I wrote, you can hit the QR code and find it on our website. But one of the things that I really, as you look at the Great Commission, Jesus didn't say go and make leaders. What Jesus said is go make disciples. And I really came to the conclusion, if your church doesn't have a strong spiritual formation plan, it will have a weak leadership development plan. I believe that if you have a strong spiritual formation plan, it will reveal potential leaders. And so let's talk a little bit about that. Leaders who are not growing disciples are simply task managers at best, and at worst, they could be stumbling blocks for those they lead and poor examples for the church. Here's 3 practical steps developing a spiritual formation process that identifies leaders. The first one is have what I call an outcome-based discipleship process. And these are 6 things, what I call 6 basics, that if I'm going to invest my life in someone for a year, for 6 months, and meeting with them weekly, encouraging them daily to grow in their life in Christ, these are 6 things that I want to see happen in their life over the next year. Six things I want to see happen. I want to see them growing in intimacy with Christ on a daily basis through the practice of spiritual disciplines. I want them to be growing in prayer, growing in Bible study, and then expanding those disciplines, right, in a deeper way. I want them to learn how to share Christ naturally, to talk about spiritual things naturally with their family, with their friends, with their coworkers. I want them to engage in spiritual conversations in a natural way. I want them to learn how to serve people. I want them to be like Jesus, who said, I'm among you as one who serves, to have a servant's heart and mentality in their church and throughout the community. I want them to mentor others spiritually through discipleship. I want them to learn how to invest in others spiritually, by pouring their lives in other people. I want them to learn how to put God first in their finances. and um, and get on that path of blessing financially, and then learn how to grow in their generosity. You know, as Paul talks about excelling in the grace of giving. And then I want them to grow in depth. I want them to understand the centrality of the gospel in their lives, to grow into the lordship of Christ, to grow in the sanctification, um, and really understand the work of the gospel in their lives. And so kind of the based process. And so we have a little website where when I was kind of in the 90s, I was kind of the discipleship guy. When everybody was small groups guy, I was like the discipleship guy. And I wrote some simple discipleship material that that we started using, and we started training church planters, and we put, you know, in our church plant, we put about 250 people, you know, through this stuff. And it was amazing how we had like 4 generations of people who disciple people who disciple people who disciple people, you know, and it was just amazing. And so many of those people are leaders today, you know, and whose children are actually now leaders today in that church. And so it was just amazing how that we saw that impact the life of that church on and on. And then what happened is these church planners would say, "Hey, hey, can I use that?" And so basically, you know, we decided to just make we gave them the right to copy. We made instead of making a copyright, we gave them the right to copy. And so we actually just sold them the license to copy these materials. And during the 90s, I had like 2,000 churches actually bought these things back then. And so, and I'd have pastors call me and say, "Gary, I got 40 people discipling 40 people. What's next?" And it was kind of a fun season. And so I'm so excited today to see the whole discipleship wave happening, you know, and people moving into one-on-one discipleship and discipling people in triads, and the personal investment in investing in people is so important. I was personally discipled, you know, at at my workplace when I first became a Christian. For 2.5 years, a friend of this new friend I met, we met for lunch for 30 minutes for Bible study and prayer every day for 30 minutes for 2.5 years. And I was being discipled before I even knew what the word discipleship meant. So the second one is be a discipler first and then a pastor. Too many pastors are waiting for ready-made leaders to walk in their doors instead of identifying and discovering and making leaders out of the harvest through a holistic discipleship process. The future of every church, whether large or small, I believe, is in the harvest. Future members, finances, and leaders, they'll all be found as we enter into the redemptive work of Jesus. The more successful you are developing disciples, the more successful you will be at developing leaders, and I believe discovering church planters. One of the things that I believe, and you know, it's this nothing scientific. It's just an intuitive thing that I have. But I believe I call my little 1% rule. I believe that there's like, you know, if you have a church of 100 people, I believe that the 1%, right? That there's one person, you know, would have the skills, the abilities, the raw skills and abilities to plant a church. And now what you have to do is you have to develop them spiritually, right? And help them experience the call of God to plant that church. They might have the natural skills to do it, but now you have to develop them spiritually to find the call of God, experience the spiritual gifts to do it. So, and then just think if you have a church of 200, a church of 500, a church of 600, 1,000, you know, they have 10, 5, think of all the churches, right? And that the possibilities of people out there in your churches who could be church planters and could be developed to discover their call in that way. And then the third one is get your best people, lay leaders, and mature followers, investing their lives in others through discipleship. Always get your best people investing in others. One of our covenant statements we had for our staff and our elders is that they would invest in at least one person every year by taking them through our discipleship material with the goal of seeing them invest and in repeating the process with someone else. Every church needs a leadership engine. Your discipleship process is the fuel to make that engine hum. Solving the discipleship issue in your church will be the key to solving the leadership issue, and solving the leadership issue is the key to solving the multiplication issues in your movement. So just a few reflective questions. Are you, and as a senior pastor, investing your life into a new believer or an undiscipled Christian? There's lots of undiscipled Christians out there. It's amazing. I was spoiled as a new Christian. And I would find, it was amazing how people would come into our church, and I would ask, well, have you ever been in a discipling relationship? And they would say no. And so there's so many people out there like that. Does your church have a reproducible process for discipleship or spiritual mentoring? How do your leaders, how many of your leaders have been discipled and are discipling others? Do you have a definition of what a disciple of Jesus is and does? Do you have a pathways for those who want to be discipled? So just thinking through that process. So, well, Randall, this would be one of those times that if there's any questions out there, we get to take a pause.
Okay, Gary. Let's see, just a couple of things that come up. And by the way, those of you, as we continue through this, if you have questions you'd like to pose, just use the Q&A feature there at the bottom of your screen, and we'll serve those up to Gary. Gary, this question was asked, and I was thinking about it in the process. You said how, today we find prospective church planners don't like the model-centric approach. And I was thinking, well, isn't that great? We just figure out how to do it. It is like all the retailers put all their money and bucks into shopping malls. That was the way to go.
Right.
Now we're closing shopping malls because people want to do another thing. And I said, someday somebody's going to get a great brainstorm. Hey, we could put all these stores under one roof and everybody could go into them. But that's editorial at that point. But you said because things shift so fast that you can't in essence put all your eggs into one basket. And you said you need that third way. Could you unpack a little bit more about the third way that you're referring
to? Well,
do
you have so one of the things that when I wrote our church planting training process, we really kept it because we had so many different types of people we were bringing in. We were planting in the suburbs, we were planting in the rural areas, we were planting in urban areas, we were planting ethnic churches. We have 10 language groups that we're working with, and so and now we're planting in different countries, and so we had to really go to a missionary model. And so we basically began really just teaching what we call missional principles, and not a model centric, not a model, for the purpose driven was a model. Okay, it was a
Yes.
model approach, right? Um, the cell church is a model approach, right? It's a model driven approach. And
Mhm.
so, the millennials, the Gen Z, they're not going to latch onto a model. And so what you want to teach them is what I like to call missional principles, right? And it was very interesting, the book I used that, and I'm dating myself because you know, it's like my friend got up, he introduced me last week and he said, Gary and I planted our churches in the Reagan era, and so
Who?
we can all laugh about that because we know the Reagan era, but I think there's some who didn't even, who's Reagan,
Uh,
and so we planted our church in the mid '80s, right? And there weren't a lot of church planting books back then, and the book
mhm.
I used actually to plant my church was David Hesselgrea's book, Planting Cross-Cultural Churches, right?
Mhm.
And he had the Pauline cycle, his cycle for planting churches, and which was a missional approach, and so I went into my town like a missionary, and I just went in and um, figured out ways of making contacting, what was the best. I had to figure out the best way to contact new people. I had to figure out the best way to, if I was going to try to gather people, right? What was going to be a best way to do that? Um, and if I'm going to do an evangelistic activity, I needed to join something, as part of the city, a city activity or outreach or something like that. But I mean, they were just, so you really got to teach young, uh, the millennials, the Gen Zs, missionary principles, and tell them, okay, that you need to kind of figure it out. You're going to be a missionary to your neighborhood, to your community,
Mhm.
and you're going to incarnationally go into that community and figure out how to reach it.
Okay, so
Like
this is
what I
hard
found.
enough. I'm sorry, did I interrupt you
Yes, go
there?
ahead. Mhm.
There's a delay here in sound. So you're sharing the challenge. It's challenging enough for those who are participants here in leading church planting to be adroit enough and flexible enough and adjust as the winds blow. But Scott has posed an excellent question because um, you also work with a number of existing churches.
Mhm.
Existing churches are not known for being that nimble in terms of suddenly shifting gears. So,
Right,
how do you help an existing church transition to becoming a disciple multiplying organization?
right. Well, I think, the best way to do it is, just the pastor, and I've done this with churches, is where the pastor starts one-on-one. He starts discipling other men, and maybe his wife starts discipling other women, one-on-one, and they just start investing in people, taking them through a process. I mean, we started with um, uh, seven seven people on a Saturday morning. I took them through some basic discipleship material, and then I said, "How many of you?" I introduced them to it. How many of you know somebody you can take them through this material, and you feel comfortable taking somebody through the material? And four people said, I know someone I can take this through, and I feel comfortable leading through this. Like they might have used something like this in Crew or Navigators or something, of that nature. And then I had the other three people said, I want to go through it with somebody first before I did it. And from those seven people, we ended up taking 250 people, through that in 5 years.
Hmm. Wow.
And so it just multiplied. So you've
Yeah.
got, it's like rolling a snowball. Now, I don't know, I'm from the Midwest, so we roll snowballs down hills. And that's how you build momentum, right? And so you invest in one, and Lord willing, they're gonna reproduce themselves in someone else, and then you reproduce yourself in someone else, right? And so it's just it's in an existing church, you can do that. I mean, that's not gonna change the Sunday morning worship. It's not gonna change, the existing programs, right? Is gonna change lives,
Yes. Yes.
right? And I did, in the early days of our church, I did 3 breakfasts every, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and met with three different men, during the week. And then as the church grew, I narrowed it down to 2. I had two different men every year. I would prayerfully pick somebody a new believer to invest my life in, that year. And not all of them became leaders, but some of them became key leaders, in certain areas of the church. So when I needed someone our land acquisition person to help us find property, who did I disciple? I discipled a realtor. This realtor came to Christ, our church, and I just invested in him. We hit it off together. I spent a whole year investing in him, and then, one of the questions we ask in our discipleship, where can you begin serving Christ in his church this week? And I said, hey, I'm putting together this land acquisition team. We need to find property. And he goes, oh, I'd love to be on that team. And, eventually he became, the chairman of it, a couple of years later, so, but
Yes,
you don't have leaders because you're not creating them, right? So,
right. Leaders lead by example, I guess, is what you're saying to us.
right.
One other question, Gary, at this point, and that is, this is maybe one that could have been saved at the end, but relating to what you're talking about in this transitioning and leading, what might be one of the hardest lessons you had to learn in all this process? You've been doing this a while, and obviously there were some lessons that came easier than others. What's one of the most difficult things you've had to learn?
Well, the human factor. It's messy, right? It's messy. People fail. People disappoint you, right? There's wins and losses. It's a battlefield out there, right? And so you invest your life in somebody. I mean, you see it in Paul's letters, don't you? You see at the end of his letters that he writes, you see heartbreak, you see celebration, you see sorrow, you see love, you see care, you see wins, you see losses, all in his letters, and that's the there's a toll, and so yeah, so that's the big lesson. So
Everyone can identify with that, I'm sure.
yes.
Just a reminder, if you'd like to pose questions, use the Q&A feature. That's all we have right for now. Gary, I'm going to step out of here and
Great.
And we'll push the game clock again.
All right, there we go. Okay. Well, so the Red Ocean strategy is basically, continue, to focus on the competitive model of addition, ready-made leaders outside your tribe and seeking to graft them into your culture and movement, or create a multiplying culture out of your healthy churches and loyal pastors through strong evangelism, rigorous discipleship, and a dynamic church planting process. So now we're going to move kind of into what I call movement systems. And I want to kind of give you a little introduction to that. And but I first want to look at this, like here's what we call the elements of a multiplying multiplying movements. Okay, and so what makes up movements, right? So the main elements are disciples, right? Disciples, and then leaders, and leaders create churches, and churches create networks, right? Networks, and then networks work together to create alliances, right? And alliances could be like multiple denominations working together. Like I exponential is, that's a great picture of, coming to, multiple networks, denominations coming together to really, um, you know, uh, just to kind of to gather together and just raise the torch of church planting, and celebrate it. And multiplication must start at a micro, must start in the micro, if it's going to have macro results. Okay, and so it's got to start here. It's got to start by making disciples if it's going to have those macro, if it's going to create churches. And so we got to get back to focusing here if it's going to have those results. And so these are the skills. These are the skills of movement leaders. How to do evangelism. And one of the things I've been trying to do for 30 years is change the word evangelism to spiritual conversations, get people into normal conversations about Jesus, and then get people into practicing discipleship, how to invest their lives into other people, and into investing their lives spiritually into other people. And then the skill of planting churches, right? And then the skill of coalescing pastors together to form networks. These regional gatherings of pastors who are going to work together to encourage each other, to work together to reach their community, reach their region with the gospel through what I call saturation church planting. The only way they could have reached their Jerusalem and Judea was through what? Saturation church planting. When I took my job when I left my church and became a regional church planting leader, I saw a little word in Acts 1:8 that I never saw before. And it's the word right before Judea. And there's a little word, and it was all Judea and Samaria, and all is really, you cannot reach all of a region without doing what I call saturation church planting. And so this skill of coalescing pastors together to work together in regional outreach is really critical. And then alliances are really, it's really complementing each other's strengths, and it's the skill of just learning how to complement each other's strengths. Each denomination, each network has strengths, and so we need to learn how to complement each other's, so that we can work together better. So those are kind of movement, kind of elements and the skills of movement, the movement, and then movement systems. So this is our definition of a movement system. Movement systems are reproducible and interconnected processes by which the organization achieves its values, actualizes its values, and it achieves its mission. Actualizes its values and achieves its mission. And so one of the things we teach in our church planning training, our church planning leadership training, we talk about the big 8 systems in a church planting movement: spiritual dynamics, recruiting, assessing, funding, training, coaching, resourcing, and mutual accountability. These are all needed to have a healthy church planting movement. And we talk about these 4 are what we call the growth engines. These are the ones you want to focus on if you want to get your movement moving again, okay? And so spiritual dynamics, you've got to have most denominations, most networks have a prayer focus. And I'm telling them all the time, hook up your prayer focus with your multiplication team, and and pray to the Lord of the harvest, right, to send forth workers, and have a strong spiritual dynamics ministry that's hooked up with recruiting and your deployment and your discovery and deployment department. And so these 2 are key to what I would say the growth engines, and funding is a key element for a growth engine. And then this is resourcing for multiplication. This is where you want to resource churches in the areas of multiplication, resourcing them in discipleship, resourcing them in evangelism, resourcing them in the finding of church planting and developing of church planters, helping them in if it's starting a site or helping them plant a daughter church, all those tools that you want to help your churches with. And then these systems are what we call the quality control systems of a movement. These are the ones that help you plant healthy churches, right? I always talk about it, we want more and better churches, right? And so the growth engine is the more, and the quality control is the better. And so assessing church planters, making sure they have the right skills, the right character, is really key. Healthy marriages, healthy psychological makeup. It's all very important in developing healthy theological training. All that kind of stuff is very important in assessing, making sure you have healthy pastors and planters on the field. And then training them. And so much of our training now is really training them to be missionaries. And then the ongoing coaching, having someone who walks alongside them, an experienced coach, experienced planter who can coach them. We have 20 coaching guides that basically take them through the first 20 months of a church plant, and they go through those coaching guides with a coach, and as part of the training, and they kind of walk them through that. And then the mutual accountability is just, we have certain commitments that they make to us as an organization, but also we have commitments we make to them, and we hold each other accountable, and we review those commitments with each other on an ongoing basis, and that's very important. So those are our movement systems that we practice. So we're gonna take a look at the recruiting or the discovery system really quickly today for the rest of the time we have. So, but when you build a system, there are what I call building blocks in constructing any system. And the building blocks are attitudes, behaviors, sequence, clarity, execution, results, and culture. So we're going to go through those really quickly for our time's sake here. So attitudes for a successful discovery system. Number one, I'd say discover first, recruitment second. You want to look within first, look within your churches first, and then look without second, right? I think it's really important that if you're looking within your tribe first, and then look without second. Now, biblically, you see Barnabas, who I think was one of the great recruiters of all time. You see him, he recruits Paul from the outside, right? He brings them in, right? He brought him in once, right? He brought Paul to the disciples in Jerusalem, but then years later, he went to Tarsus. He went and got him and brought him to Antioch. But also Barnabas raised up John Mark from the inside, right? He raised him up. And you see, so both are very relevant. But I would say in these days, we want to always be looking from within. And when I first took over church planting and left my church in 1998 and came to the Midwest Baptist Conference at the time, we had 86 churches, and they had planted two healthy churches in 10 years. And so we really didn't have a lot of healthy, multiplication opportunities. And so really finding planters from within was very difficult. And so we were, I was going to every church and trying to discover what was going on and working from within. But I also had to recruit. I had to find some good planters from without and try to find people who would fit us, fit our culture, fit our future dream. And so I had to rely heavily on some great talent from without to really get us moving again. And so probably those first 6 years, I was heavily dependent on people from without. But then slowly we started finding people from within our churches, and then finding people from within our new churches that we were planting. And then by year 8, we were mobilizing 4 to 5 to 6 churches a year, and we were starting to get 50% of the churches that church planters were deploying were coming from within our churches. And one of the men who's on my board today, this is 25 years later, is a man who came to Christ, in one of our churches, and has planted a church, and he's pastoring, been pastoring for, 20 some years. And so, it's just very exciting, to see that. So, and then we've got a whole pool of people now, that are in there. And then we've gone through waves. We've had a great season where all of a sudden we're about 70% are coming from within. And then, we've gone through a wave where it went back down, we cycled in and out. But now right now things are drying up, significantly, and you've got to be developing them from within, or you're not going to be planting at 3 to 5% a year. If you have 100 churches, you need to be planting at least 5 churches a year to grow. Because so many churches are dying every year, and you're losing so many churches a year, and so you won't have a positive growth rate if you're not planting at least 5% a year. So think the 1% rule. Think about just think about your churches, but it's almost like a faith thing that there's at least 1% of the people in your congregations have the skills and abilities to plant a church, and you've got to find them, discover them, and help them realize it, and find that calling. Be a spotter, not a seller. You know, spot the skills and abilities of being a church planter. Be a developer, not a negotiator. Always be looking for new fishing pools, and then even look at refreshing old ones. You know, whether it's old school relationships, old, you know, if you got schools that are connected with your denominations, go back to those old relationships and re-engage with them. You know, different things like that. Shift from have a shift mentality from a scarcity to sufficiency. Just it's kind of a faith, you know, having a faith mentality towards the harvest, just believing that God's out there. I used to pray in the different cities that we were targeting, and I never went to a town saying, you know, Lord, help us conquer this town. Because, you know, I was going into cities where there were lots of evangelicals, there were lots of solid Christians in those towns. And the Lord really taught me how to pray that, Lord, help us to discover the people who want to work with us. Help us to discover the people you have for us to work with here. And because we believe you're calling us to this city. And so we don't want to come here like conquering heroes. We want to come here like missional partners. And so help us find the right partners, the right time, you know, because it takes a village, not just a solo entrepreneur to win a city. So you've got to find those partners. So, all right, let's keep going. Let me go back one. What behaviors, you know, discovery needs to be embedded in every action of your organization. You know, always thinking about connecting, making new contacts. Every pastor and leader needs to be a discipler. You know, you as a leader need to be, who are you discipling? Who are you investing in? You know, make sure you got discipleship materials and training opportunities available throughout all your churches, new and old. You know, make sure you're having evangelism, discipleship training, and cohorts available on all levels throughout your movement. Sequence, you know, what are the steps that need to be taken, right? Form an organizational discovery path, right? And so we got this idea of awareness, right? And then you have a discipler, leaders, apprentice, residents, planter, multiplier. And then you could build this list going up like a catalyst to a regional leader. You could keep building the list. It's kind of the old idea, the old leadership pipeline idea, really developing that formation plan. And when you think about sequence, you're again developing the formation of an organizational discovery and development pathway. Now, here's one of the things that you want to understand about Gen Z. Gen Z doesn't like this idea of going through a funnel. They don't like the idea. They like the idea of steps of discovery and things like that, but they don't like to feel like they're a product. So you got to be very careful when you have these things out there, you know, that's got to be really kind of organic feeling, and you got to be very careful how you in a sense present it. But you need to have clear steps on how to become a church planter with your organization. And you make them clear as possible, right? What are the actual steps of how to become a church planter with your organization? Or how do you become a church multiplier, right? Or a church catalyst, church plant catalyst. Make whatever those steps are, make them clear as possible. For the local churches, how do you become a discipler? How do how do you get in your discipleship process within your church? So clarity, who, where, when, who, what organizational habits need to be formed, what stories will you, how will you tell your stories, right? Through social media, through presentations. Whose stories are you going to tell, right? So you want to tell the story of that pastor who's changing his church one life at a time by investing in one person, one breakfast a week, right? You know, and getting others to invest in others, one meal at a time, and through personally discipling people and investing in them. When will your stories be told, right? Certain meetings you have, those are key denominational meetings, network meetings. Tell those stories. It's really, and then who will be the champion of your discovery process and discovery system? Typically, it's going to be your church planting leader, but it could be someone on the church planting leadership team that could be the champion of that process. So we have what we call together groups around we have 22 together groups in our 15 states. And so we have a champion in every one of those together groups that is really a champion of church planting and helping discover church planters, and always talking about it and always praying about it and putting it for prayer requests. And as they always talk about uncovering potential church planters and putting them through our assessment process or other discovery processes that we have. So, one of the things that we've been playing around with is just like dinner parties. Just having people who might have some entrepreneurial skills and maybe some inklings of calling to ministry, just to hang out with church planters for dinner, and so Friday nights, and just to hear the stories and get to know them and meet them, and so those are kind of like some discovery nights that we're looking at. So execute. How is the sequence working? How are these steps working? What are you already doing that can be part of the foundation of the next level discovery system? What are you doing now in your movement, to discover church planters? How's it work? What's working? And then what can you do in the next 30 days to move towards a robust discovery system? And what can you do in the next year? What can you do in the next 5 years to really develop the plan? Can you imagine, if you kept track of just started keeping track of pastors who are focused on discipling men every year, what that would look like? If you have 100 pastors and each pastor said, I'm going to invest in one man a year or 2 men a year, and then he said, I'm going to get my pastors to do that, my staff to do that, and my elders to do that, boy, you're gonna start seeing some things happen. So results, what are you measuring? It's a scorecard regarding the pathway categories: awareness, disciples, how many disciples are we making, disciplers, are we making disciples, are people actually moving from a disciple being poured into to what now pouring into others? Are people becoming leaders where they're discipling more than one person and maybe leading a ministry? Are people becoming apprentices in the sense of maybe walking alongside a church planter, helping a church planter, or helping a leader? You know, and then are we mobilizing planters and multipliers and catalysts? You know, are more planters being developed? Are more churches being planted? And are more people coming? You know, how are you measuring the harvest? Every denomination has a way of doing that. That's critical. So, um, and then culture. What will be the impact on the attitudes, behaviors, and the heart of the organization? The discovery becomes becomes organizationally intuitive. You know, once you have this process happening, you know, it just becomes you start discovering people. It just becomes an intuitive process in the heart of your leaders. New fishing pools will be created. You'll start finding church planters in places where you never found them before. The harvest will increase. The future harvest will increase. Missional progress will be accelerated. Generosity will increase. You know, unity will be fostered, and territorialism will die. You know, when I first came as a church planting leader, we had terrible territorialism. We had 86 churches, and we had terrible territorialism, where basically people, we had a town where one church said, "You can't plant our church in this town." And today that's all gone. Nobody's arguing about, you know, we can't plant a church here or there. It's all gone. And diversity will expound. We are now about 65% of our churches are churches of color. It is expounded tremendously. So we've gone from 86 churches to today. I think we're at 784 churches in the 27 years. Key components: evangelists, disciplers, recruiters, developers, catalysts, fishing pools, fishing strategies, you know, clear organizational pathways that empower. All these are key things. So development opportunities, internships, residencies, cohorts, developing evangelism and discipleship cohorts, I think, are really critical. And then your marketing, social media strategies, they really function, what I like to say is air support for the ground game. And telling the stories, getting the stories out there, reinforcing your vision and values is really critical. So, all right. Well, Randall, we got any questions? I think we'll take those now. I know we got delayed here a little bit.
So. Yes, I was stuck in the transporter room, right? So,
yes.
Gary, yeah, we're coming up on the close of our time here, and for you who are our participants, I know this has been like drinking from a fire hose. You know, today has been rich. Gary has been so good. Just a couple more questions, though, Gary, as we wind this down, and just a couple more minutes for you who are our participants. First one, Gary, I want to ask you how you have navigated attention. There's this tension. I know you face this, and the folks on this webinar have or will also. You're looking inside, you're looking from within, you're looking for that 1%. You find some of the 1%ers. Well, chances are the pastor of that church has also identified that 1%er, and he has his eyes on that 1%er. Staff member grooming them already, perhaps even to become a successor. And along comes Gary Rohrmayer saying, "Hey, I'd like to send this person out to plant a church."
Yeah.
Talk to us. Right. How do you deal with that?
Well, if they truly are a church planter, you don't want to keep them inside an established church, because they'll you know, they won't have the patience, or they'll because
Mm.
to wait around to be a successor, right? So actually, it would probably be good for them to go out and plant the church and get some experience while they're waiting around to be a successor. Actually, that is a way that our African American churches, that's the way they do find a successor, is they actually send their sons in the faith, they
Yeah.
send them out, and to be pastors or church planters of other churches, and they watch them.
Battle
Um,
tested.
and they basically kind of watch them do their ministry from the outside, right? And then when it's time for them to leave, they'll actually bring them back and have them succeed in that way, not keeping them always inside by them all the time. So that's another strategy. So yeah, and one of the things I think it's I think pastors need to, part of the maturity of pastoral leadership is holding people and things and money gently, right? It's holding it gently in the hands of, before the Lord, right? And so that's a key thing. So but I would, part of it would be is, getting them assessed and looking at their skills. And if they do have those skills to be a planter, and the energy and the drive to do that, they're going to want to go out and launch something new, rather than trying to lead something that's already up and running.
That's good. That's good. I guess that's part of the identifier of the 1%. That is what you're telling us, and the characteristics that God has embedded within them. So one other question then, you talked about how it's imperative for pastors to coalesce together, to look for, their own network in their own area and how they can help one another. And you mentioned how denominations and networks could build, I think, alliances, how they could work together and how important that is. And Rodney is interested in knowing, can you unpack that a little bit more? How denominations and networks can partner together? Is it through training? Is it resources? Is it through cultivating, preparing planners and leaders? And do you have any examples of where you could say, these two groups or these three groups, here's what they're doing together. They're not taking from one another. They're contributing to one another in the process.
Yeah. So, I mean, it accelerates an alliance, okay? Because I've got multiple denominational leaders that work for me as coaches. And so we provide the coaching to help to walk alongside a leader for a year, and to just help them navigate the difficulties of being a regional leader, because it's very different than being a pastor. And so we get guys who basically being hired, they'll leave their church, or that maybe they're actually in there pastoring a church and they're trying to be a regional leader. Well, those are very different. It's very different skills, and it's very different. It's very different from being a regional leader to being a national leader.
Mm.
And that's totally two different jobs, two different skills. And so that's one way. So Accelerate is an alliance of gentlemen that work for me, and so we do help through the coaching system. And then Converge, we do an assessment, and there's other organizations actually that do church planting assessments. And we've always been open-handed to allowing other fellowships to use our assessment centers, and to send candidates through. We actually used the Presbyterians, I believe it was the PCA assessment centers back in the 80s. And I actually have the manual that with Tim Keller's name on it. He was one of the authors of it back in back in the day, and um, and they basically taught us how to do assessments, and then we got good enough to do our own, and so we've ever since then we've shared our assessments with other denominations, and we shared it with the Covenant Church, and they used ours forever, and now they do their own assessments, and the Open Bible used ours for a long time, and I believe they're doing their own now, and different over the years it's been that way. So like assessments, coaching, training, different church planning training deals like that. Those are things that we can do together, right? And work together and share those things. I think where it gets hard is the funding thing, because, when you start exchanging money, you got to have, the commitment to doctrine, the commitment to, paying that money forward, that kind of stuff. That gets difficult to do that, and so, but certainly on those other when we look at the other systems, I mean, having prayer gatherings, that certainly those are great other systems that we can work together on. So
I think that what you've just pointed out, those examples, I think are some of the most refreshing examples of church unity on display today, and we desperately need that. So thanks for pointing those out. And Gary, thanks for sharing your time today. I know we have just scratched the surface of everything that you have to share. And I say to our participants, I know that you also are at various stages of leading church planting. And, wherever you are in that process, Gary's available as a consultant, you can see here, and as a coach. And we'll also be emailing the recording of this webinar to you. Gary, you want to say anything quickly about these items here, and then we're going to close off?
Yeah, so we just, this is our services that we do, and like I said, go to our website and you can see this, but these are the services that we offer, and I do a half-day consult. My board pays for me to go to a denominational office, or we do it via Zoom. The only thing we ask is that the key decision makers are in the room, okay? And we'll help. We'll give you half a day and to just sit with your team and walk you through whatever you're struggling with, and kind of help you assess the situation. And then we provide 2 levels of coaching, executive coaching, and I have a number of coaches that work for us. They're on our website, and so and you can see the price is very modest, and so that's available there. And then if you want to find out more about the consults, you can contact us here, so for any of that stuff. So, but yep.
Thanks again so much, Gary, for helping us today. And for all of our church planning people on this participating here today, we just say to you, may the Lord prosper your church planning endeavors with fruitfulness. Thanks for coming today.